Hello and Hashem. Today I would like to talk to you about this book, Laurie Cabot's Book of Spells and Enchantments by Laurie Cabot with Penny Cabot and Christopher Penzac. This is, it would be considered a tome, a real tome, and I think that more than a spell book, this is basically Laurie's inheritance to the world. She's getting into her 80s, she's getting older, and when people get to a certain age, their inheritance should go there, and Laurie Cabot really has a great inheritance. You can see her all over since the 60s and the 70s, and she was a witch all her life. She was really a witch all her life, and she's a very well-maintained, well-respected member of this community. Now, let me begin in the ending. This is a good, flawed book. And as I said in previous book review videos, if that book could teach me 3 new things, this is considered a good book. And this book taught me more than 3 new things. Alas, it does have its flaws, and the flaws are basically like a tapestry. When you go and you look at this beautiful tapestry and you see this giant ass 5 inches stitch holding the whole thing together, you understand that there is a place where some other technique could have been used to preserve the pattern. And I believe that my best critique about this book is that it's not my best critique, my biggest critique about this book, that this would have been a wonderful book had it been published in 1998, okay? But after better writers came and wrote many spell books, I expect any spell book that would come out, unless it has a new twist on some older spells, that it would contain new material. I don't need 5,800 versions of Witch's Bottle to protect the house. If any author would give me a new perspective about this, then that would be great. Okay, or they would reconstruct that spell in a different way that wasn't done before. But this is, as you would probably, my channel watchers start to understand, this is a very difficult thing. The Ancient Ones has had the same problem we did, and magic is a problem solver. Now, let's talk about those large stitches. One of the things that you see here done very well is the subject of neutralization, okay? She replaced the Jesus Christ, I smite thee in the name of Christ, that I neutralize thee in the name of the goddess. Really, it's hilarious. Ritual magicians, one of the most basic spells, I'm sorry, we have dust storms here, I have to take my drink every once in a while. Ritual magicians have this lesser banishing ritual of the pentacle, and the lesser banishing ritual of the pentacle is a ritual that is like to banish the flawed elements around you and connect you to divine light, and basically put you in a sphere of light, which is wonderful, but it's also very sterile. It's very sterile, and it creates this energy lab, okay? And when this was done in the old days, it was understood that this is basically a combination between magic and science, and this should be invoked in specific situations. But nowadays this is like the basic tenet that everybody is doing. Everybody is banishing the elements and connect themselves to the deity and sends white light everywhere, and this creates problems because it basically destroys the very unique nature of the world around us. It creates this industrialized McDonald's-like energy that is maybe slightly more elevated with the skill of the magician, of course, or not, but it's like similar. And it's a problem to use it all the time. So, but if she has a bad thought in her head, or she worries about the future, or she sees something with negative energy, she make a big white X about this, and she says, I neutralize thee. In voodoo, I would think, in my tradition, this would be considered something that she could do with, I'm sorry, with her white privilege, to neutralize things with white light. But this starts, I'm afraid that this mechanism starts creating an unrealistic view of reality. She also says in the, okay, what happens in this book is like, it begins with forward introduction, chapter 1, spells and enchantments, where she explains like, how to cast spells basically, and I have an issue with that also. Chapter 2, magic and ritual, and again, alpha, all sorts of tools that we have seen before, all sorts of tools that we also saw in the Power of the Witch before, and maybe even better written in the Power of the Witch. Chapter 3, the magical apothecary, which is basically a shitty version of what Cunningham did, and Cunningham was her indirect students through Raven Grimacy. And only in chapter 4 this begins to be a formulary. This begins to be a magical thing. Okay, this begins to be a grimoire. After 3 episodes, that takes 1/4 of the book of the same old Wiccanese 101 shit. She starts talking about actual magic. So you have a chapter about protection spells, and of course in protection spells she says harming none. Forgive me for a second. And afterwards she has a chapter about love and romance, chapter about prosperity, chapter about healing, chapter about whole magic, which is a very confused, oversized chapter that has many subjects in it and could have been made better. Chapter 9 about travel spells, chapter 10 psychic powers, the magic of empowerment, deity magic, borrowing magic from other traditions, magic, religion, and creation, and those are basically the chapters. Where are the hexes? Well, she says if you have proper protection spells, you don't need to hex. And there is truth in that, but there is also a problem, because look, protection spells are basically an upside down hex. They created situation of if then. If somebody comes to attack me, the protection comes out, and if it's something coming from the element of fire, my attacker will be burned. If it's something from the element of earth, my attacker will be knocked down. Okay, it's the same Saturnian Mercian energy, and since you don't know how to use it to cause harm in a precise way, you don't really know how to protect yourself in a precise way. And she doesn't have the foresight, knowing that, mixed with the New Age, because look, many witches are also New Agers. You can't really separate New Age from witchcraft nowadays, especially when you go and read books and buy those books and not being initiated into a specific tradition. Okay? So, causing harm is also causing that same astral knife that allows you to cut cancer from your patient body. This is also harm. It's the same Saturnian energy, it's the same Margian energy, but you don't practice this in her book. She doesn't have those in her book. Okay, she hasn't advanced with the time, or decided to share this knowledge with us in that book. Now, she doesn't also see that when witchcraft mixes with New Age, the situation of what you think is what you summon and neutralizing your negative energy will turn to, okay, I don't need protection spells because protection spells make me think of possible harm that might happen to me, and I expect the gods to elevate me into a place and position in life where harm will never happen to me. Okay? Now, this could have been done better. This is, the video, I just said video. This could have been done better if she would have just, said, listen, there are hexes in the craft. I'm using hexing myself, and she does, I can assure you. I don't feel it's safe to share those hexes with the public in this book. If you want those hexes, either use the divine grace that you have with the deities and converse with them, because neo-paganism is all about your personal connection with the deities, or come to me for a lesson, or go to those books that are out there for a lesson, or do whatever. Also, she could have done this with the rudimentary how to cast a spell, that so it wouldn't take 1/4 of the book, because now it's like trending that you have to go through some basic, horrible, boring shit in the book until you get to the interesting stuff. And yes, I've read it all. I've read every page in this book, and I've read it thoroughly to see if there is anything interesting on you in this matter. Okay, so we get to her magical apothecary, and of course it's the same old thing. I'm waiting for her to say the medicinal usage of herbs is conducive to their magical use. If it causes diarrhea, if it cleans the liver, it's a purificatory herbs. If it causes you a rush in heartbeats, the rush of the heartbeats, this is a romantic herb, But nobody is saying that in modern literature, because maybe it's not cool, or maybe it's not cool to say, go and learn some herbal medicine, but proper herbal medicine, so you can understand your herbs better instead of just, using basil from the kitchen. But this is where stuff starts to get sort of interesting, because it's interesting for me to see how you can use this chapter to, she was basically a shop owner. She was a shop owner in Salem, Massachusetts for many, many years. So this book should be like widely diverse, herb-wise and material-wise. And she's talking about, in this chapter about herbal magic, herb magic in trees, resins and gums, essential, infused and fragrance, stone, mineral and metals, animals, graveyard dirt, colors, etc., etc., etc. She gives you correspondences that she likes, but also she ignores different ones. For instance, she's talking about heliotrope oil. Now, please comment, lovely people of witchcraft that watches my video, please comment in my stuff and tell me if you have ever used heliotrope oil in your spell casting. Tell me. The heliotrope essential oil, of course. I haven't. I know, in Israel they grow a variety of heliotrope, which doesn't have so much smell. But when you look, and the heliotrope, she uses it to add solar energy to many of her self-empowerment and protection and other spells, also of course Slav and Roman spells. But this herb is not in the tiny encyclopedia of magical herbs. Now, what were you trying to achieve? This is a very unknown herb. And this is, a complaint about the editing of the book. I think this book could have been edited better. This was edited with the help of Christopher Pezak and Penny Cabot. You could have done this better. You could have shown your teacher and your mother in a better light by doing a better work at this, by reading this material further. Okay, now this is where I get to the good stuff. Some of the herbs that are here, I didn't know their usage. I didn't know Bougainvillea is used to bring the grace of the goddess to stuff. Okay, but I think my largest victory from this book is this. Can you tell what this is? Here, I'm showing it up close. This is Torah resin, liquid amber orientalis. Now, I brand new benzoin, and this is basically another tree. This is like the liquid amber tree, or sweet gum tree in the US, and I didn't know how wonderful sweet this smells. This smells like vanilla, amber, a tiny pinch of rose, and some funk, okay? And she says this is good for purifying, neutralization, and I'm saying this is good for love spells. She's like, you know, after I've seen like Storax, I saw Storax, I saw heliotrope, I saw strawberry leaves in all sorts of spells around this book. I'm like, okay, if I really want to practice this book, I should learn about all those materials that I don't know and, you know, purchase them. So this is, you know, I got this from this German shop, and I got 250 grams, and this is not the whole 250 grams, it's like 2/3 of the 250 grams. This is a lot. This is like a big jar. I'm very happy with this purchase. I'm very happy with this material, and I should thank her for introducing me to this material. I wouldn't use it everywhere though. I would use it only in certain projects and not other projects. So, you know, I learned, this is one of the things that I've learned. So, you know, when she's talking about neutralization and protection magic, and that you don't need hexes when you need that, she doesn't see what happens in the New Age scene, and she doesn't understand how her words would be taken out of context and rape the book. Now, she has many things here reprinted from The Power of the Witch. And again, as an academic also, you need an excuse to reprint materials, okay? It's not that The Power of the Witch is becoming out of print. It's not that she hasn't given the recipe for her protection potion like elsewhere. And it's not like this is such a wonderful, powerful potion that needs to be like done, you know, in many, many great things, okay? Now, okay. Another thing, she has this great love of fairy magic and practicing fairy magic, and this is another problem, okay? Look, she is a priestess of the Morrigan, and I think priestesses of the Morrigan should read her, and I will explain later why. But once you start to worship a certain goddess for a long, long time, you get certain blessings that you will not get elsewhere. For instance, walking with the fairy folk, okay? Now, any basic magic book that one would read that has any lick of sense in it will tell you fairies are not humans. They don't have compassion. They don't have they are not nice creatures. Walking with the fairies for all sorts of causes, you need to be very precise. You have to be worried about certain things happening. But she feels free to give you like fairy spells for everything, and I'm like, this entitlement, I think, should come after walking with Celtic deities for a few, maybe even 10 years, okay? Because it's extremely dangerous, okay? It's like, you know, the opposite of this is like those people, and those of you who walk with Hecate, you know who you are, okay? You know that necromancy at some point becomes easy as shit. You learn that, you know, talking with the dead, banishing evil dead, doing necromancy, talking with the ancestors, astral projecting to the other world becomes like very easy, because this is something you get by the grace of the goddess. But you know, she has those spells all over the book, but she talks about deity magic in the 12th chapter. And so, if one just wants to open the book and cast a spell from it, this could be a very serious problem, because, and also she doesn't give you safety tips of walking with the fairies. She doesn't. So this is almost dangerous in this regard, in my opinion, and what I have been taught during my few years on the craft. Okay, another thing. Okay, I liked very much her chapter on love and romance magic. I think that in a way it's the most complete one in this book. Okay, it tries to be non-manipulative, and you should always try to be non-manipulative when writing such things. Oh, also she has a claim that she learned witchcraft from the witches of Kent. Okay, either by channeling those or meeting those and actually studying lessons under them, and she used that to claim for her power. But she claims also that the witches of Kent taught her to harm none. And I'm like, if one goes to the Cromwell's Witchcraft Museum, you see that British magic has all sorts of fun harm to be had. Voodoo dolls, hexes, all sorts of distorted, disgusting things, okay? Obviously, she is not talking about... She's either fibbing this to glorify herself, or she has met the wrong witches, or I don't know what. But she doesn't give us a Witches of Kent spell, per se. Okay? So, it's all about her. This is another thing. You taught Raven Grimacy. You have two beautiful daughter witches. You have you know, you also probably met the illustrious Cunningham people that are better writer than you are, better, you know, that basically they are renowned worldwide. Why don't you talk about them? Why don't you tell us stories about your relationship with them? Why don't you tell us what you learned from them, from being their teacher? Why don't you tell us how you have grown? Why don't you say one positive thing about them? Why? I would have loved to know, what do you think about Raven Grimace's recent works? I would have loved for you to you know, to give a bibliography that has his works that you like. I would have loved if you wrote a memorial for Scott Cunningham that died in such a tragic way in 1993. I know it's a spell book, but when you mentioned them so briefly, and I needed this more than I needed yet another lecture about the application of karma. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so, you know, and one of the other things that are great about this book, you know, it seems like I'm talking about this all those negative things, but I'm basically telling you, if this is bothering you, that those little crude things that she's doing there, you don't like them, then don't get this book, or borrow it in the library and get the good stuff out of it. But aside of that, I have two more criticisms. One of the criticism is like her use of the word potion. She uses the word potion for everything done from herbs. A mixture of dry herbs is a filter, and oils are potions, and you know, water imbued herbs with other materials are also potions. But potions are meant to be imbibed. You know, the fact that modern witchcraft tradition doesn't want to take responsibility in teaching the community of how to make magical herbal teas, because those magical herbal teas might contain something that somebody is allergic to, and you don't want to take that responsibility, and you don't want to create this book, even though that book would have been wonderful if somebody would have taken this on, doesn't mean that your oil is a potion. It's an oil. And your herb mixture is a herb mixture, it's a dried potpourri. And it's wonderful, but it's not a potion. So I would consider this like a boo-boo, but it's a minor one. And another one of the boo-boos is, okay, she also, you know, she goes along with that almost pathetic, laughable game of spelling, finding a new creative way to spell magic. She just writes magic with a J instead of magic with a CK, and please, why do you think it's impressive? Do you really need to find out by doing this, who is basically practicing your work or not. Most of the witches out there are eclectic anyway, okay? And magic doesn't need any more spelling. Doesn't. Now, because this is such a giant tome, it has like 430 pages, even fourth of it is like, again, the rudimentary how to cast a spell and stuff like that. And I suggest for somebody that already knows how to cast a spell to simply skip this. Don't even skim it, skip that chapter off. The Deity Magic of the 340 page is like the best chapter here, okay? Those of you who are very much into Celtic magic and that reimagined Celtic magic the way it would suit the modern neo-pagan community, this chapter is for you. It's really cool. It has been a very long time since I've seen Ceridwen and Ariane Hood and Rhiannon mentioned and explained and spell casted around them. So if you are into Celtic magic, this book would suit you very well. Very, very well. Even if you are British witches. On the other hand, all those spells that require rowan berries, rowan tree, I cannot do. Or I need to find a very good replacement because I live in Israel and we don't have rowan berries. Rowan trees grows only in the US and Europe. So when she adds that and she doesn't give a proper replacement, I assume she doesn't expect her book to sell overseas, which is a mistake. Because, especially since we got this globalization going on, you have Wicca in Japan, you have Wicca everywhere, and of course you have it also in Israel. So I wouldn't expect her to give up something from her tradition just to get things done, but I would like her to do something that is like more easily accessible or give replacement where replacements are due, which is required of her as a sorceress. Another thing I liked is that she really enters Jupiterian energy to prosperity spells to create like a balanced prosperity career things. This is something you don't see so much in other spell books. This was new. I liked it. Like, she adds the color blue when you cast a money spell, when you cast a career spell, for blue candles. And I like it. I like the connection of witchcraft and astrology, and this was slightly neglected for a few years back in the 2000s. So, yay for you. And also, and this was again new for me because I didn't necessarily understood how to apply it, even though I knew the basics of this, but I didn't really think about how to incorporate that with a spell. And she has it all written down. And her money spell chapter is decent. It's very decent. So all in all, it's very recommended. It's very recommended. It's not a text that is lacking problems. And again, if this was published in 1998, this would have been the greatest. So this is my book review. Please, if you have read this book, please tell me what you think about this. If you have other things to mention, I don't want to be like the single reviewer of this book, which is one of the most important witchcraft books ever published last year, in my opinion, out there. Okay, goodbye, Nashe.